Hello, family. This is Yesha Yahoo with Stranger Thinking Media. Hey, I just want to take a second out to introduce you to our product line. It ranges from everything from composition notebooks to journals to a full length novel. So let's take a look inside. This is our composition notebook. And it is sold on the website and also on Amazon.com. This is our activity puzzle book. It's full of great puzzles from Sudoku to Mindfinder to crosswords to maze puzzles. It's available on the website or on Amazon.com. This is our Mindfinder puzzle, available on our website or on Amazon.com. This is our maze puzzle, and it's again available on the website or on Amazon.com. This is our journal record book, notebook, great for taking notes or your daily prayer. Available also on Amazon.com. And this is our full length novel, not yet available, coming soon though. God Through the Eyes of the Hebrews, The Elephant in the Temple. And of course, we have our Sudoku puzzles that's available now on the website or on Amazon.com. And as always, family, remember to like and subscribe. Hello, family. This is Yesha Yahoo with Stranger Thinking Media. This is my second video. Hopefully, you saw the first one. I was trying to figure out what topic I should talk about to, start this thing off, and something that's really important to me, and I think is important in general, are the scriptures as a whole. Most people think that the canonized Bible, which is a book, Bible actually means book, is the extent of the scriptures, or what most people say is it is. Those are the only ones that count because those are the ones that were canonized. And yet, if you actually read the Bible, you'll see that, for instance, the book of Jasher is referenced like 2 or 3 times. The book of Enoch is referenced. Peter and Jesus, Yahusha, they both allude to the book of Enoch. They don't exactly quote it, but what they're talking about is only found in the book of Enoch. So that tells me, and from some research, it is true that at that time, the book of Enoch, for instance, was something that was revered and studied. And whether you want to call it scripture or not, whatever, but I know that when people say, well, it's not canonized, you got to ask yourself the question, well, who made these determinations as to what should be canonized and what should not be canonized? And if you do that, you have to go back to, about the time of the Council of Nicaea and Constantine and all that stuff. And it can get very political. My intent is not to go all into that history. There'll be time for that. But let's just say this. It was the Romans who decided what Hebrew scriptures were going to go into the book. And that's kind of, if you really think about it, that's kind of odd because, simply speaking, these are Hebrew scriptures, a continuous line of historical and, of course, spiritual anecdotes. So it was the Romans who decided what was going to go into that. And if that doesn't sound a little fishy to you, well, it does to me, considering it was the Romans who destroyed the temple and enslaved the Hebrews, the Judeans, and drove them out from their homeland. And there's a whole history on that. We can get into that at another time. But, your spidey senses should be tingling if you think that what's in the Bible is all there is. And so you have all sorts of texts that have been found. Obviously, the Dead Sea Scrolls are big, the Masoretic texts. And what you'll find, for instance, in the Dead Sea Scrolls are all these books that are not in the Bible. And yet they were preserved and hidden. That's how important they were. These books were hidden and preserved. So to think that the only scriptures are the 66 books of the Bible, that's a misnomer. So we shouldn't think that way. Now, at worst, you should look at it as, hey, here's some writings that are very historical and connect to the Bible. Okay, look at it that way if you want. But to just write it off and say, I'm not going to read that because it's not in the canonized Bible. Remember, scriptures are not a book. It was turned into a book. Scriptures were scrolls for teaching purposes. And without a doubt, all of these were used for teaching purposes. And, to one extent or another. So what I want to do is introduce you to books that I'm telling you, if you read them, it will change your world. It will change your outlook on the Bible. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't mean that all of a sudden, you won't believe the Bible. What it will do is fill in gaps that you probably always wondered about. And just nobody ever gave you a really solid answer. So you kind of fill in the blanks with whatever thought that came into your mind. And some of those thoughts are actually accurate. It's just that these books might confirm your thoughts or clarify your thoughts. So the book I want to introduce first is the Book of Jubilees. And for those of you who don't know what a jubilee is, essentially, it's, if you think of it this way, the Bible, the number 7 is so important in the Bible. Some people say it means completion. Some people say it means, finality or whatever. But what it really means, and I kind of hate when people say completion because the number 3 represents completion, but the number 7 represents perfection. So what you'll find is At the end of 7 years, according to the laws of Moses, and I want to also clarify all that too, is that when we say the law of Moses, most people think, oh, it's the law of Moses, so we don't have to do it. But when you really get into the Book of Jubilees, you start realizing these laws were in place before Moses. What Moses basically did was refresh the memory of the people. Hey, we're supposed to be doing this, this, and this because back then, you know, Abraham did this, this, and this because the Most High told him to do this, and so everybody is thinking that Moses is pulling this stuff out of thin air when he's only teaching a people who had been in slavery for hundreds of years or whatever. He's restoring their understanding of the Most High. He's not making it up on the spot. He's restoring. And so as you read the Book of Jubilees, you'll realize things like the new moons, Pentecost, Passover, all of these things were already in existence. He's just reteaching the children of Israel these things. So when people say, no, that was just the law of Moses, only the Jews and the Israelites had to follow that, that's not really true. Because remember, Abraham was not a Jew or an Israelite. The Jews and Israelites come out of Abraham, but before Abraham was even circumcised, he was observing these things. So the Most High Yah, he, and Paul brought that out. Yah talked to him before he was circumcised. So to make circumcision, for instance, something that has to be done for salvation, it kind of belies the point is that the Most High talked to Abraham before he was circumcised. He was speaking to an uncircumcised man. And then he told him, hey, this is what I want you to do. On the 8th day, all your children, after they're born, should be circumcised. So, we can internalize that. We need to internalize that because that's going to bring the whole picture together later down the road. But for our purposes here, we're going to look in the Book of Jubilees and that number 7. 7 years. At the end of 7 years, there are certain freedoms afforded. And then at the end of 7 times 7 years was called the Jubilee year. Actually, the Jubilee year was celebrated on the year after the 7th of the 7 years. So basically, 49 years would pass, and on the 50th year, they would celebrate the Jubilee. And what that would mean is simply all debts are forgiven. Imagine that. After 50 years, all debts are forgiven. And of course, that could bring about certain other problems because if you know that year is coming and somebody owes you money, you might want to, you strong arm them to get that money or whatever before the 50th year, knowing that debts are forgiven. Human nature kicks in. But it's a noble concept, and it was a mandated concept that after 50 years, all debts are forgiven. If you were a slave or a employee, you could decide at that moment you don't want to be that anymore. And so if you say were a slave, you could decide I'm no longer a slave, I quit. And there's nothing your master could do because after 50 years, because of the Jubilee year, you were free. Now you could decide, for instance, that, and that's why I say when the term slavery in this case is more linked to employer. I know that sounds strange, but at that point, you could decide, I love this guy, I love working for this guy, so I'm going to stay with this guy. And then there was a process where you can sign the paperwork essentially. It was a little more extreme than that, but you can sign the paperwork and become his servant forever. That's because you love working for this guy. I mean, the perks were there. You didn't have your own sheep and goats and all that, but you loved working for this guy because he got you a nice house, your living was good. You were essentially an employee more than a slave at that point. Because if it was like chattel slavery, why the heck would you want to sign back up when you could be freed at the 50th year? And remember, the 50th year, if you were made a slave in the 49th year, you only had to be a slave for 1 year, because the 50th year would come and you could make a decision. So that Jubilee year was big. A lot of people, their focus was on that 50th year because all sorts of things would change at that moment. So the Book of Jubilees, what it does, it doesn't so much go into what a Jubilee is. What it does do is it counts time, kind of using the Jubilees as the timekeeper. So, in other words, instead of saying, oh, in the 75th year, this happened. No, it would say something on the order of, and I'm not going to do math in my head, but it would say, oh, in the second week of the second Jubilee, well, the second Jubilee is started in the 51st year, essentially, of existence. And it would count, instead of saying 75th year, it would say the second Jubilee, the second week of that. So the second week of the second Jubilee would be 50 years plus 2 weeks of years, for 14 years, plus that 50 years would be the 64th year in that case. So that's how this book accounts. But what it does, it does a rehash of stuff you're probably familiar with from Genesis and Exodus, but it fills in gaps, things you probably ask questions about that, like I say, it just straight out tells you. You don't have to guess. So anyway, we're going to go into this a little bit. I'm just going to start it off. But I'm going to get to what I call a quick hitter point, something that I think everybody should know right out the gate. So we're going to try to breeze through these first couple chapters and get to that point. And the point I want to get to basically is, hey, who was Cain's wife? Who was Seth's wife? How many children did Adam and Eve have? Well, the Book of Jubilees kind of goes into that. So without further ado, let's look at and I don't know what I pulled this off the internet. I'm not sure what version of Jubilees this is. I usually use my Sefer Bible version, which I really like that Sefer Bible. That's a plug for the Sefer Bible. But for my purposes, this is probably good enough to start. So, and I'm not going to read through the whole thing because I don't want to turn this into like a PowerPoint slide. But it starts chapter 1, verse 1. And it came to pass in the first year of the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt. Of course, the Sefer version would say Mitzrayim, not Egypt, because Egypt is a bastardized term. Mitzrayim is the son of Ham. And so the people we call Egyptians today are called Mitzri, right? Mitzrayim. In the third month, on the 16th day of the month, that God spake to Moses, saying, come up to me on the mount, and I will give thee 2 tablets of stone of the law and of the commandment, which 2 I have written, that thou mayest teach them. And Moses went up to the mount of God, and the glory of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and a cloud overshadowed it 6 days. And he called to Moses on the 7th day out of the midst of the cloud, and the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a flaming fire on the top of the mount. And Moses was on the mount 40 days and 40 nights. And Yah taught him the earlier and the later history of the division of all the days of the law and of the testimony. So what you're going to find out, and I'm not going to read all of it, that there are connections also made. For instance, Moses received the law amidst, if you remember the story, amidst lightnings and thundering on the cloud. He received the 2 tables of stone. And what you don't realize is that was Pentecost, And there are a lot of things that happen on Pentecost. And we're going to get into some of that too as I go through this. But what you're going to find is Pentecost is the day of covenants. It's like every time God wants to give a covenant, it's on Pentecost. You'll see what I'm talking about. You kind of know at least the one out of the New Testament, but I'm going to tie them all together at some point. So let's skip down and we'll try to quickly. I'm not going to make this a long video. It's probably getting longer than what I planned anyway. But I think it's on page 9 where they get into Adam and Eve. I like to call them the Addams family. There's a lot of strange things went on there. So where was this? Chapter 4. And in the third week, in the second Jubilee is 50. The second Jubilee would be 100. The end of it would be 100. So what they're saying is in the third week, the 21st year of the second Jubilee. So you would just add 21 to 50, which would be the 71st year of the existence of Adam and Eve. She gave birth to Cain. And in the fourth, she gave birth to Abel. And in the fifth, she gave birth to her daughter Awan. Did you get that? She gave birth to her daughter Awan. The canonized Bible does not mention Awan or these other children. But Jubilees is breaking it down to you. So remember these names, because you've never seen them before, right? Awan. And in the first year of the third Jubilee, Cain slew Abel because Yah accepted the sacrifice of Abel. And of course, Yah accepted the sacrifice of Abel because he brought a blood sacrifice. It was him acknowledging that blood would have to be shed for the remission of sins. He recognized his shortcoming and the shortcoming of his parents and his brother and all of them. The superhumans, I call them. And I don't think we get that, but Adam was a superhuman. He was a superman. He was perfect. God created him perfect. The only reason he didn't live longer than 930 years or whatever, is because of sin. He was created perfect, untouchable. I mean, we don't realize that the only reason we think we're healthier because now we live to be 80, 90 years old. Yeah, we live to be 90, 100 sometimes, but how are we living? What's our life like? What, we're on dialysis or something? We can barely walk at that age? Or no, Adam was a superman. God created him perfect. He was 930 years old, and his natural life force was not abated. Like he said of Moses, he took him. His natural life source was not abated. So what we have to look at is us as human beings today. We can barely call ourselves human compared to what the Most High created. We live to these ages that aren't even that old, and we think, wow, we're doing good. No, we're so corrupt that if we didn't have modern medicine, we probably wouldn't make it past the age of 60 half the time, But here's Adam, no medicine, no interference, the only reason God cut his time short, you're going to find out, is because he told Adam, in the day you eat from the fruit of that tree, ye shall surely die. And it turns out he did die in the day he ate from that fruit. But remember, 1,000 years is but a day. You follow what I'm saying? Are you tracking? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Adam did not live to see 1,000 years, because 1,000 years is but a day unto the Most High, right? So he died just short of 1,000 years, fulfilling God's judgment on him. That in the day, in that 1,000 year period, you got to get where I'm coming from. In the day you eat of that fruit, notice him and Eve, or Chua as she's called in these books, they didn't die that day, but they died in the 1,000 year day. And so there's little, I don't want to call them tricks, but there's little things you got to pay attention to. So understand that God didn't lie to them. They died in that day, that millennial time frame. So technically, they didn't get to see the second millennium. They died in that day, that first millennium. So remember that 1,000 years is but a day. So, and I thought that was an interesting topic. So I thought I'd bring it up to you guys. It's interesting stuff. But Cain slew Abel because Yah accepted the sacrifice of Abel and did not accept the offering of Cain. And he slew him in the field, and his blood cried from the ground to heaven, complaining because he had slain him. And the life is in the blood. So keep that in mind too. And the Lord reproved Cain because of Abel, because he had slain him, and he had made him a fugitive on the earth because of the blood of his brother. And he cursed him upon the earth. On this account it is written on the heavenly tables, cursed is he who smites his neighbor treacherously, and let all that have seen and heard say, so be it. And the man who has seen and not declared it, let him be accursed as the other. So that makes you a co-conspirator. And for this reason, we announce when we come before the Lord, our God, our Elohim. So I'm going to start saying the actual Hebraic word. So Lord would be Yahweh, our Elohim. So Yahweh, as we know, means I am, or I exist, or the eternal. That's a good word, the eternal. That's basically what he was telling Moses. So Yahweh, our Elohim. El means mighty one or powerful one. Elohim means the mighty ones or the powerful ones. So God, Yahweh, our Elohim, all the sin which is committed in heaven and on earth and in the light and in the darkness and everywhere. And Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years. It's 28 years. And in the 4th year of the 5th week, they became joyful. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son. And he called his name Seth. For he said, God has raised up a second seed unto us on the earth instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. And in the 6th week he begat his daughter Azurah. And Cain took Awa his sister to be his wife, and she bare him Enoch. Not the Enoch we know of the righteous line, but Cain was still trying to hang on. So he named his son Enoch also at the close of the 4th Jubilee. So the 4th Jubilee would be, what is it? Jubilee 1 is 50 years. The end of Jubilee 2 is 100 years. The end of Jubilee 3 is 150 years. The end of Jubilee 4 would be 200 years. And in the 1st year of the 1st week of the 5th Jubilee, houses were built on earth. And Cain built a city and called its name after the name of his son Enoch. And Adam knew his wife, and she bare yet 9 sons. Oh boy. And in the 5th week of the 5th Jubilee, Seth took Azurah, his sister, to be his wife. And in the 4th year, and in the 4th, she bare him Enos. And he began to call on the name of Yahweh, the Lord, Yahweh, on the earth. So I'm going to stop right there because I just wanted to introduce you to that. Because I'm telling you, if you really want to know more, because it gets into the feast days and how Abraham observed those long before Moses. You know, like I say, Moses didn't make these things up. So I just wanted to introduce you to the Book of Jubilees. Um, Hopefully, this has sparked some interest, and maybe you can pull this down offline. It doesn't cost you anything. But as you start to read it, you won't be able to put it down. I mean, if you are into understanding the scriptures, you will not want to put down the Book of Jubilees. It just grabs you and holds you, and you start going, "Wow!" Your jaw drops open because this information has always been around, and someone's been keeping it from you. That should send your spider senses just you know you should just be going, why would somebody want me not to read this? So that is the question. Why would somebody not want you to read this? And this is just the beginning. So if you really want to understand the scriptures, you need to kind of, once you've, I don't want to say mastered the scriptures, but you've read it and got a good understanding of what it's saying. You might not completely understand every concept in it, but once you start reading books like Jubilees, it starts clarifying concepts in the canonized Bible. So I challenge you. I mean, it's not going to hurt you. Just go in there and read it for yourself. Read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Anyway, I'm going to end this session here. And as always, please like and subscribe. And thanks for listening. God bless.